but let's put something kind of up front in the conversation here that sometimes gets treated a little bit like a boogeyman in politics for good reason, and that's money and how we fund our campaigns. And so last night we had an event here in Northeast Baltimore at Maggie's Farm restaurant, and it was the topic of the event was public campaign finance. And speaking of dads, my father-in-law was there, and we were talking about all this wonkery, and he was like, "Woo, go public finance," and kind of making fun of us for being dorks. But let's chop it up. Let's get into it, and let's talk about why funding our campaign in a different way than politics as usual is a top line goal for this campaign. So first, what is the status quo? How do candidates in Maryland fund their campaigns? And then how are we approaching financing our campaign differently?
So you can't talk about the problems with the two-party system and with politics as usual without talking about the influence of money in politics. So Citizens United passed in 2012 or something like that, and it created the opportunity for a whole bunch of corporate money to go into politics and to help reshape the political landscape, not just at the national level, but particularly at the state level. And I think one of the things that happened during the 2010s and the 2020s is as the federal government doom loop and polarization and partisanship was getting worse and worse, people realized that they couldn't enact their big policy agendas at the federal level. So they shifted all of this money and energy to the state level and started pouring all of this money into state level campaigns that really changed the way that state politics work in a place like Maryland or really anywhere. And what that looks like in Maryland is there's a $6,000 cap on the amount of money that anybody can take from a person. LLCs can donate to campaigns, PACs can donate to campaigns, and there's a whole bunch of entities that can donate to campaigns. So we have this thing where there's a whole bunch of money, oftentimes from outside of the state, oftentimes from donors who are looking to purchase the outcomes that they want, who have reshaped our politics in order to serve donors, national political parties, and national interests. So that's sort of the status quo. And we all know it. We all know that when we don't have to look at the political science to understand that money in politics dominates the decisions that get made. Corporations and the elite get to set the agenda, and they get to determine what gets passed. And they do that by making money the coin of the realm, as it were. Now, I think that if you do look at the political sciences, some really interesting study that says popular opinion almost never shapes the outcomes of federal or state legislative decisions. Elites and money almost always are the ones that are shaping the outcomes. And when they do happen to align, like when the outcomes happen to align with popular interest, it's because there's elite money behind those types of things. And so that is the way that politics works right now. Given the way that is how politics works right now, and both parties have taken a stance against unilateral disarmament, by which they mean we know the system is bad, but we're going to keep doing it. We end up in this space where there is no way out of the money in politics situation. Like, nobody's going to repeal Citizens United. Congress is not going to pass campaign finance reform in a significant way. So we've got to get creative on how we address that. And that's where I think public finance comes in as the antidote to this type of politics. Mamdani used public finance in the New York primary and in the New York general, and it was a big part of helping him get the money that he needed to fuel the campaign that he had. But generally, and there's a lot of places that have some public finance. Zach Blanchard used public finance in Baltimore City last year to win a council seat against the most entrenched, dare I say, most influenceable by money. I don't want to get sued by using some other words, but most influenceable by money councilperson Eric Costello, who was an entrenched incumbent who had a lot of those $6,000 donations. Zach Blanchard, who was a teacher and a football coach, was able to run a really grassroots campaign using Baltimore City's public financing program in order to challenge that, and in order to beat an entrenched incumbent and show people that the power of entrenched incumbency and that money doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes in advocacy circles and in theoretical conversations, we talk about kind of superficial reforms or reformist reforms. And this isn't, from what I can tell, one of those, right? This really does get to the root of the problem and creates an alternative. It doesn't get big money out of politics, right? It does not.
And that's not its goal. Its goal is not to get big money out of politics, because as long as Citizens United is the way that it is, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But what it does do is it allows campaigns like ours or Zach's or other folks to have the resources they need to be able to compete in order to get their message out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the situation in Maryland in a statewide race. How long has this been around in Maryland, and has anyone ever used it? You mentioned some city council races, some examples from other states at the municipal level. We're talking statewide. We're talking the highest office in state government in a mid-sized state. What's the precedent here that we're operating in relation to some degree?
Yeah, so in the 1970s, after Watergate, Maryland and New Jersey and some other states adopted some form of public financing for certain offices. So some form of public financing at the gubernatorial level has existed in Maryland since the 1970s. I think Ellen Sowerberry used it for a governor's race back in the day. Larry Hogan used it in 2014. But those were different kinds of programs than we have right now. Those were like about how you spend money, not how you raise money. So the new program went into place in 2021, and I think the first election that it was used in was 2022. And Rashern Baker and Nancy Navarro used that in the Democratic primary in 2022. They're the only ones who have used it in the new version of the program that went in place in 2022. And now we're the second ones who have used it at that level. We are the first small party campaign to do it and the first campaign to try to do it for the general election. So how it works is that it sets up a system where you have to opt into the program. So you and I have opted into the program at this point. And once you opt into the program, you can only take donations from individuals, and those donations are capped at $250 per person. So nobody can give $6,000. People can give people in state and out of state can give $250 per person. For people who are in state, we have to get 1,500 of those donors. And they have to, at least 1,500 in-state donors, and they have to give a total of $120,000. We need that by about the end of July of 2026. And if we do get that, we qualify for matching funds that come from the state. So the first $50 are matched at $8, which means that a $50 donation is matched at $400. So if we qualify, some of those $50 donations we got last night will be worth $400 for our campaign. And then there's like some complex math. I think the second $50 counts at $6 for matching. The third $50 counts at $2 for matching. You can go to the website gogreen2026.com, donate, and learn more about this and figure out the exact math if you want to nerd out on it. But the basic premise is that if we agree to cap our donors at a high, at $250 per person, only take donations from individuals, and be very transparent about how we earn and spend our money, we are eligible, if we get 1,500 Maryland donors and $120,000, to get matching funds for the general election for the state. You and I have done some calculations on it, and it turns out to be between $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 that we could get based on what the combination of donations we get to make up that $120,000. And that is transformative. We were talking at the beginning about how these kind of funds allow campaigns to have the kind of reach that they would never have otherwise. And you and I can do a whole lot if we have $800,000 in August of 2026. We can tell a lot more people that the two-party system isn't working for them and that we have an alternative and that they have a voice and a vote in empowering that alternative.